Behold, the Ribble Ultra SLR, the most aerodynamic road bike ever. According to Ribble, of course. But I mean, just looking at it, it certainly looks like it could be the most aerodynamic bike ever made. But looks fast doesn't always translate into is fast. So in this video, I'm going to go through all the details of the new bike and how it's designed to be optimal in the wind. I'm also going to weigh it and do a free hub sound check. This sparkly bad boy has been 3 years in development. Aside from looking like it was stolen from Batman's house and then rolled in glitter, it kind of is reminiscent of many of the most aero bikes we've seen of recent times. Kind of like a greatest hits compilation. And that's not a criticism either, because I happen to think the greatest hits compilations are some of the finest albums ever. Speaking of which, Now 34, greatest compilation ever. Anyway, the rear triangle, that kind of reminds me a bit of the System 6, and then the way that the stays jut out and the wider fork as well, that's a bit like the Hope Lotus track bike. And then you've got the way that the fork integrates into the down tube here with this blade. We see that as a common feature on many bikes, such as the Venge. And then the wider down tube that's designed to integrate the round water bottle, that's, well, it's like a Pinarello Bolide or the Pinarello F. Anyway, to label this sparkly aero weapon as merely a greatest hits compilation of everything that's gone before it wouldn't be doing it justice at all. The R&D team behind the bike featured the Total Sim consultancy based at the Silverstone Sports Performance wind tunnel. These guys work on Formula One and in motorsport, and also created the Olympic medal winning Vortex skin suits and WXR track bike in Tokyo. These guys aren't messing around. Interestingly, I've seen a few people question why Ribble didn't opt for a narrower down tube designed for a narrower, more aero bottle rather than a round one. And there's a simple answer to that, and it's practicality. Round bottles work. This is a bike designed and built for racing, and round bottles are far superior ergonomically. They're easier to insert and remove from the cage. They're easier to grab from the side of the road or a team car, and they're one of the few sort of industry standards we have in cycling. You know, when you consider the amount of bottom bracket standards there are, we should probably hold them dear until something better comes along. In the meantime, bikes designed and built for racing should be designed and built around round bottles. The bars, however, are a new hit single, one you haven't heard before. They feature a very novel design. First thing to point out on them is these bulges on the top section. And the thinking there is that as a leading edge of the bike, as the airflow hits them, it bulges out and creates a wake which the rider is able to sit in. The airflow is therefore channeled better and more efficiently around the rider, in particular the rider's knees. The result is a bike which, when combined with the rider, is faster overall. That's a bit of synergy, David Brent for you. Now, while I said this is a novel design idea, it is on bikes, but it's not an entirely new idea in that it's the same kind of principle, or one of the principles, that's employed on the front wings of Formula One cars. And there you can see that collaboration with Total Sim at Silverstone coming to fruition. Because at the Silverstone tunnel, one of the facilities they have is the ability to create mannequins and 3D print them to sit them on a bike. And that's one of the things they did. They tested this bike with real riders, but also with mannequins. And the advantage of being able to 3D print a mannequin is that, well, mannequins have a constant position, they don't change. They also don't get tired or take lunch breaks. I actually had a 3D printed mannequin of me made, you may remember. It wasn't very flattering. I've seen some people question this feature as well, saying that, well, it's going to vary the effect of having this wake created by the bars from rider to rider, you know, depending on the size of the rider and things like that. And Ribble, when they designed it, did actually test it and design it with different size riders, including males and females.
And the other thing to consider is that it's adjustable with regards to the shape and size of the bar, and also the position of the bar, the height of it, and the length of your stem in relation to the size of the bike that you ride, and something that you can kind of tweak when you order and get the bike so that it's the right size for you. It's also a criticism that was labelled at the Hope Lotus track bike, because those wide fork blades that you see on that bike have a similar kind of aerodynamic relationship with the legs of the rider, and obviously different sized riders are going to sit differently within the wake of those fork blades. The difference here is that that isn't adjustable, that's fixed, whereas this is. But the key thing, according to Ribble, is that even though the aerodynamic benefit of these bulges changes and varies slightly with respect to the size and position of the rider, the result was always positive. There's other features on the bar as well. So the drop section has been specially shaped to better aero integrate your hand when it's holding it. And it's also got a textured surface so that it's designed to be used without bar tape. You can see it doesn't have bar tape on here. This is because bar tape adds a bit of bulk, increasing surface area on the leading edge. Bar tape isn't very aero, and it adds a surprising amount of weight as well. Trust me. So I take it off for hill climbs. To be able to achieve a more aerodynamic lever position on the bar, Ribble actually has done away with the standard 23.5mm clamp that you use on most handlebars to attach and clamp on the levers, and instead has developed its own removable plate. And according to Ribble, this has given the designers much more freedom to develop more aerodynamic handlebars and hand positions on that bar. But it's quite a novel idea, again, to see bike designers doing that. The bars are available in different widths with different stem lengths as well. This is an effective 135mm stem and the 38mm wide bar, which Ribble recommends everyone goes for because it's narrower and more aerodynamic. There is also a super narrow 33cm bar, which I'm going to call the Dan Bigham Special. Ribble has analysed and honed every single tube shape on this bike, taking into account different wind speeds, different yaw angles, and those UCI rules.
Yaw is the direction of the wind relative to the bike and rider. And outdoors, where I am now, it's constantly changing. So when designing a bike for real-world conditions, it's important to take this into consideration by performing sweeps. Now the Silverstone tunnel can do this because it has a turntable which can rotate the bike and rider relative to the direction of the airflow. And in designing the Ultra, Ribble analysed a sweep of -15 to +15 degrees of yaw on every single tube shape on the bike. And this is a really comprehensive range. It's actually wider than many of the existing top aero bikes that are on the market today. So if we put that into context with relation to the fork, you can see it's really wide. It's actually 68mm wide, but the UCI and their rules would allow for a wider 80mm fork. Now Ribble tested this and they found that a wide 80mm fork does work really well, but as soon as you go beyond 10 degrees of yaw, it kind of drops off an aerodynamic cliff. And they found that 68mm was kind of the sweet spot for real conditions. And I can hear you asking already, yeah. But what about the Hope Lotus track bike? That has a massive wide fork. And yeah, you're right, it does. But at higher speeds, yaw typically decreases. And when riding indoors on a velodrome, yaw decreases again, although yaw does still happen a bit in velodromes, but that's another story. The main difference is that this is a bike designed for real-world outdoor conditions.
Certainly looks fast. And I've not even mentioned the paint yet, which is incredible. This is a stock option on the Ultra SLR, and it's kind of this unicorn blood, iridescent, glittery loveliness that just changes colour every time the sun moves or the light changes or whichever angle you look at it. But that's not all. That's on the main surfaces, but then on the sort of back surfaces, like the backs of the bars here and then the inside of the down tube, you've got this kind of brushed sort of metallic effect, which also looks absolutely superb. But looking fast is one thing. How fast is it? What are the Aero claims? Ribble has published data comparing the new Ultra to its previous endurance bike, which is used by the Ribble Well-Type race team, and the cockpit that's on that, which is the level 5 cockpit. So that's an integrated bar and stem, but it's not anywhere near as fancy as the Ultra cockpit. They've also released the data at 2 speeds, so 35 kilometers an hour, which is a good, respectable, fast pace, but achievable for amateurs, and then also 47 kilometers an hour, which is kind of pro race speed. Now, Ribble reckons that the Ultra bar is 2.1% faster than the already Aero integrated level 5 cockpit, and that's for a bar of the same width. Now that 2.1% translates to 23 seconds over 40 kilometers at 35 kilometers an hour, which is absolutely massive. And what's even more astounding is that Ribble reckons that difference could be as much as 40% improvement if you were to compare it to a worst case scenario, which would be a wider non-aero round bar and stem. And most people do tend to run wider bars than 38 centimeters. But that's just looking at the bars in isolation. Taking the bike as a whole with the new cockpit, they reckon that at 35 kilometers an hour over that 40 kilometers, it's a whopping 75 seconds quicker than the endurance with the level 5 cockpit, which again, absolutely massive. And then if you actually compare that to the faster speed they tested, so the 47 kilometers an hour, the saving's a bit less. They reckon around 61 seconds, so it's still a minute, which is huge. But interestingly, at the lower speed, you get a bigger saving, and that's because, well, the rider is out on the course longer. On average, they found that at 35 kilometers an hour, you were saving with this compared to the endurance around 1.89 seconds per kilometre. Which is quite a lot when it adds up. If you're doing imagine if you did like a 300 kilometre ride. It'd be a lot, wouldn't it? Another really cool aerodynamic detail is the way that they've used the fork to shape that, especially to shroud and sort of hide the front brake caliper out of the wind. You can see it's very nicely tucked away there. And also that fork is just really wide and deep, taking advantage of the changes that were made to the UCI rules. Oof. I'll tell you what, I am gonna take a picture of this and I'm gonna put it in the bike vault so you guys can vote on it nice or super nice. Let us know what you think. I mean, I think this could be the most super nice bike ever. It is Bike Vault Gold. I'm keen to actually see what it weighs, so I'm gonna weigh it. I mean, it does feel pretty light, but it's got some deep wheels in. Unfortunately, I left the scales. I didn't bring them with me, I forgot. So here's me back in GCN Megabase. I'm not in GCN Megabase because I went there to look for our scales, and Simon Richardson is on the naughty step because he's stolen them and taken them home to weigh all of his bikes. So I've had to come to a local bike shop to borrow their scales. Anyway, let's weigh it. It's coming out at 8.18 kilograms, which is heavier than I thought, actually. It didn't feel that heavy when I was riding it. Remember, Aero does trump weight. Anyway, back to me, where I was before. That does include as well pedals and bottle cage. Got to do a free up sound check, haven't we? It's got these rather nice Envy 65s on there. So, I'm gonna lift it up. I've got like dead legs from kneeling. Right, let's listen to this. Revving it. Sounds good, doesn't it? So there you have it, Ribble's new Ultra SLR. As mentioned, this is a stock colour, but one of the cool things about Ribble is they have a custom colour configurator so that you can pick your own, although I do rather like this one, I have to admit. You can also customise the spec and components in the configurator, but the SLR starts from £3,899, around just over $5,000 US. And then there's the SL version, which is the same frame design, but instead of the Ultra cockpit, features the level 5 cockpit we spoke about from the Endurance, and that is a bit cheaper, just over £3,000, and which translates roughly about $4,500. I really hope you've enjoyed this look at what is, well, I think, a really interesting bike, and certainly a very beautiful one. And let us know your thoughts and comments on it down below, and give this video a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it. All right, I'm going to go for another ride actually.